Here in the UK, we have a number of what I would consider to be spectacular looking birds. Things like kingfishers, goldfinches, bullfinches, long-tailed tits. There's another bird that, particularly for me, I believe is just as spectacular as those birds I've just mentioned, and that's the bearded tit, or as it's sometimes also called, the bearded redling. So why two names? Well, actually, the bearded tit is not a true tit. Um, it has its own family, which is the redling family, but the name bearded tit is the most common, and that's the bird that we're going to look at in this video. Due to the poor weather that I actually had on the day that I was photographing, what I've had to do is come here, back home, and film. As I said earlier in the introduction, bearded tits aren't the easiest birds to photograph, to find, or even to see out in the open. So what we'll do in this video is we'll look at how to identify them, we'll look at their habitat, which is very important, and where to find them. Look a bit about their lifestyle, how they go about their day-to-day life. I'll talk about my approach to photographing the bearded tits, and I'll give you some top tips along the way. So let's go and find a bearded tit and photograph it. So how do we go about identifying the bearded tit? Well, generally the bearded tit is larger than a long-tailed tit. It's been described as a small, dumpy, ginger brown bird with a long tail. Males and females have a number of differences, and I'll go through that with you now. Firstly, we're going to look at the male bearded tit. It has a blue-grey head, it's got sandy brown back, distinctive yellow eye and bill, and underneath the tail, the coverts are coloured black, and it has a black moustache, not a beard. Why it was called a bearded tit, not a moustache tit, don't know. But it's not a beard that it's got, but it's got a very distinctive handlebar black moustache. That's the male. When we look at the female doesn't have a moustache. Females tend to be paler brown than the males, and actually overall the females tend to be paler than the males, which is normal in birds. The female doesn't have any black coverts underneath its tail, and it has yellow eyes and bill similar to the male. So the male is really distinguished by its blue-grey head and very distinctive moustache, whereas, as I said, the females generally tend to be paler with no moustache and no black tail coverts. One thing that's very important if you want to go and photograph the bearded tit is to recognise its call. Bearded tits tend to be quite social birds, moving around in small flocks at the time, and they're quite vocal, chatting between each other, even in flight. Being able to recognise the call, as I'm going to state on a number of occasions throughout the video, is very important if you want to photograph these beautiful birds. They have one of the most distinctive calls around. It's like a metallic ringing ping ping. It's almost bell-like. Once you hear it, you're never going to forget it. It's their way of keeping in touch with each other as they navigate through the reed beds. And here it is now. Next thing we're going to look at is the habitat and where we're going to find the bearded tits. Bearded tits are uniquely found in reed beds. What you're looking for are dense reed beds. Normally the best places to find them are on management reed beds, which are managed by organisations like the RSPB or the Wildlife Trust. Or you come to places like this, which is Alkborough Flats, which is in North Lincolnshire in England. And what you're looking for is you're looking for the birds to, you will hear them first. You'll hear that distinctive call, and you'll know that there are bearded tits in the area. What you've got to look for on a nice calm day is for the reeds to be moving. That'll give you an indication that there's birds there. And just be patient, take your time, and wait for the birds to appear. Let's now look at what the diet of the bearded tit is. They have an amazing ability to switch the diet, which consists of mainly insects, larvae, spiders in the summer, to then turn into eating seeds, which they extract expertly with the specialised bills. However, they do have problems actually digesting them. So during autumn and winter, bearded tits will consume grit. On some RSPB reserves that I've seen, they'll actually put trays out and they'll put grit so the birds will come down. What they'll do is they'll eat the seed so it goes into the gizzard. When they then eat the seeds, it's then crushed by the grit in the gizzard and they digest it. Top tip. Best time of year to go and find and see bearded tits, is in the autumn and in the winter. That's when they switch the diet from insects and they switch on to eating seeds. It's at this time of year that the bearded tits are at their most active, and it's going to give you your greatest chance of actually finding them. Another thing that I've discovered, talking with other people that I've met when I've been out photographing bearded tits, is that the best time of day is early morning. I was up at 6 o'clock this morning to get here to Arkborough Flats. I was here as it was getting daylight, got set up, and sure enough the birds did it. We heard them first, and then they did appear, and come about 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning, that was it. It was all over. And I think that's because what happens is the birds will come down onto the ground to take the seed into the gullet, and then they'll go to then feed on seed. Arriving early is the key. So, autumn, arrive early to give you your best chance of finding and photographing the bearded tit. What I want to do now is just take a little time out to give you a look forward to another project I'm working on at the moment, and that's the waxwing. Probably the most anticipated bird here in the UK every winter. Bird photographers, it's probably the #1 target. So, look forward to photographing waxwings coming soon from Kevin Hatley Photography. And now back to the video. What I want to do now is just talk to you about the equipment that I use when I'm going out to photograph bearded tits. First thing, you're going to need a tripod. You're going to spend a lot of time standing around waiting. So you have your camera set up on a tripod, nice sturdy base. Excuse me. Recommend you have a telephoto lens, minimum 500mm I would suggest. Sometimes the birds just sit that little bit off, so you need that reach to get to the birds. Positioning yourself when you're photographing the bearded tits, you want to try and get as low down as you can, but if you can, get down to eye level. Another thing to look at is if you see the birds landing on a particular reed stem, you can pre-focus on that reed stem, ready for the bird to come back and land. The habitat's quite messy. Sometimes your focus can jump if you've not got the right settings, and I'll talk about settings later. Top tip, binoculars. As I keep saying, bearded tits are quite difficult to actually see due to the habitat that they live in. So it's a good idea to have binoculars. Keep saying it, you're going to hear them before you see them. So once you hear that distinctive ping, you need to be scanning the area with your binoculars to try and find out and locate them. Another good idea is if you're with somebody else, is actually to have somebody spotting, because it can be quite difficult if you're looking through your binoculars, you spot the bird, you go to your camera, by the time you get onto the bird, you've lost it. If somebody's spotting for you, they can spot the bird, you're on the camera, and they can get you onto it. A pair of binoculars are going to be your best friend when you're out photographing bearded tits. Top tip, patience. Photographing bearded tits is definitely a waiting game, and you need a great deal of patience in order to do so. The best approach that I've found to actually photographing them is to find an area where you know that the bearded tits are in, pick a spot, set yourself up, camera on your tripod, and wait for the birds to come to you. And that's where the patience comes in. Don't go chasing them, because that's going to do two things. It's going to disturb them from going about their daily life and feeding, and it's also going to mean or lessen the chances that you're going to get close to them to photograph them. So patience really is required when you're photographing these birds. And that's why you need a tripod or a monopod, as you're going to be standing around for quite a while. I did a previous video on how to support your camera using tripods, monopods, bean bags, ground pods, etc. And I'll leave a link for that below. What I want to talk about now is the camera settings. When it comes to camera settings, I would recommend the following. For your shutter speed, the small, fast birds as we've seen, therefore included with the type of environment they're in, moving about in the wind and on the reeds, you're going to need a relatively high shutter speed to start with. and then adjust accordingly depending on how much light you've got, keeping an eye on your ISO. My go-to starting point for shutter speed for photographing the bearded tit is 1/1000th of a second, and then depending on the conditions I will adjust that accordingly. When we look at the aperture, I would recommend anything between 5.6 to f8, with f7.1 being the optimum aperture in my experience. When it comes to ISO, I always shoot in auto ISO, and by doing that what I'm looking to achieve is to maintain the high shutter speed and the aperture that I've got, and I don't need to worry about it. Other settings I'm going to look at are to set it to autofocus continuous, or as it is in Canon, which I use is servo, and you're going to have to be looking to take as many shots as you possibly can, so therefore you're going to set it to a high burst rate, or the highest frame rate that you've got, to try and ensure that you get that one sharp image that you're after. Top tip: Spot AF for me is the number one go-to autofocus setting for when you're photographing these small, beautiful birds in the environment that they live in. As I've seen, the habitat, reed beds, combine that with the wind, getting your autofocus onto the bird and maintain it can be very difficult, and that's where Spot AF comes in. So, Spot AF, get it on the bird, and that should ensure that your autofocus isn't jumping onto the reed, jumping onto a stem, or anything else that's in the vicinity of the bird. Get it on the bird, lock it on, and you should maintain your autofocus. Top tip: weather conditions. Photograph with bearded tits. If you see today it's quite a windy day, the wind is your enemy. What the wind does, it forces the bearded tits down to the bottom of the reeds, and ideally you're looking for a nice, good, calm, sunny day where the birds will emerge up the stems of the reeds and bring themselves into position where you can actually photograph them. So it's always worthwhile checking the weather forecast before you're going out to photograph bearded tits. And that's why in windy conditions you need to make sure that your shutter speed's high enough, because you'll have the reeds moving, birds on it, and that's why you need that high shutter speed when it's windy to freeze the action so you can get a good sharp image of the bird. So there we have it, the bearded tit. A stunning, unique and truly fascinating bird. From their distinctive moustaches to their specialised reed bed lifestyle, they truly are a joy to behold and a joy to photograph. What I want to do now is just leave you with some of my favourite images of the bearded tit, and I hope that you enjoy them. Okay, thanks for watching this edition of Kevin Hatley Photography and the bearded tit. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have photographing this beautiful, beautiful bird. All I would ask is that if you've liked it, could you hit the like button? Could I also ask you to subscribe to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography. Doesn't cost anything, it's completely free. And what that does is it just allows me to build the channel and gives me that incentive to keep going out photographing nature, wildlife and birds, and sharing that experience with like-minded people around the world. So, until the next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.